for our webcast, 8 New Ways to Generate Revenue. I'm Kayla Anderson, the Marketing Specialist here at Augusoft. We have a great event for you today, and we're very happy that you could join us. Before we get started, I'd just like to go through some quick technical housekeeping items. Today's webcast is going to be muted for attendees, so there won't be any live interaction. We will be able to answer any questions that you may have. The panel on your right provides an area for you to enter your questions that we will go over at the end of the webcast. We are recording today's presentation, and the recording will be made available to you over the next few days. Without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce our presenter for today, Greg Marsello.
Thanks, Kayla, and hi, everyone. Glad to have you on today's webinar. This is actually the second time we've done this webinar due to the popularity. So if you missed the first one because it was full, thanks for joining today. For those who I haven't met before, my name is Greg Marsello, and I'm one of the co-founders of the Learning Resources Network, or LERN, and I'm LERN's Vice President for Organizational Development. Probably most important to understand about me is that I'm a road warrior, and that I'm on the road about 50 weeks a year visiting continuing and community education programs throughout North America. So I get a chance to see what people are doing and what's working and what's not working. And hopefully some of the things that I'm sharing today will be things that I've learned and will be useful to you. But one of the things that I really work hard at is helping lifelong learning programs succeed. And what I mean by that is that a lot of times I do what are called program reviews when I go in and take a look at a program from top to bottom and provide recommendations, tips, strategies, etc., in order to help them grow or improve performance. But the point here is that those of you who don't know much about the Learning Resources Network, our focus really is helping continuing and community education programs succeed. And so we do that in lots of different ways, and you can see that our tagline is information that works. So hopefully today what I will be providing you is some information that will help you and that works for you. The agenda that I'm going to follow is I just want to talk a little bit about the LERN-Augusoft relationship so you understand why I'm presenting this webinar through Augusoft. And you will see that when I'm presenting, I'm going to be showing with regards to some of the new ways what Augusoft's software tool Lumens does to support these new revenue generation suggestions. Second thing I'm going to do is talk about what I consider some pretty obvious strategies regarding new revenue generation, but a lot of times what's obvious to me is not always obvious to everyone, so I just want to touch bases a little bit on that. And then we'll go into the 8 new ways and talk about those. And then I'm open to answer whatever questions that you have. As Kayla said, feel free at any time during the presentation to type those questions in. And then at the end, Kayla will read through those, and I will respond to those questions the best I can. And if I can't, I'll give you a tip on how to get the answer, or I'll even help you get the answer. So we do our best to get you every answer we can. One of the things that I want you to understand is that LERN and Augusoft have been working together since 1999. We are what you would call strategic partners, and that when LERN projected that most continuing and community education programs would be shifting to web-hosted or cloud-based software, we teamed up with Augusoft to build Lumens, and Lumens is the first web-hosted software system that was provided for the continuing and community education industry. And we continue to work with the Augusoft team to upgrade Lumens, so to add new features, and some of those features will actually be ones I'll talk about today, as we've been looking at new revenue streams, is making sure that Lumens does support those new revenue streams. And then I work really hard in this relationship, and I'm sort of the liaison between the two companies in order to ensure that we're building into Lumens as many of the LERN best practices as we can. I do understand that every program is unique, but normally 80% of what we do is the same. And so there are certain ways to do things that are better than others, and we try to build those best practices into Lumens. And again, LERN and Augusoft together really are committed to helping lifelong learning programs succeed, and so succeed with software, but also succeed with the strategies that support that software. So one thing, of course, I have to qualify my presentation on is by saying that what is new to one person may not be new to another, and I do understand that, but this is what I'm seeing folks do. So you may already be doing this, or this may be an aha for you, and you may say, boy, I really ought to be looking at that direction. So we'll see that as we go through today. So the first one are our 5 obvious points. And let me go through these because it's important. As I visit programs, I normally find that staff have about 50% of the skill set they need to really successfully run their unit. And so many times some of the things that we might assume that programs are doing, they're not always doing. And these are all geared towards helping you generate more revenue, remembering that new revenue is not just offering certain new classes or programs, etc., but it's also how you do business. So the first one is what we call be customer managers, not product managers. And this means that it's your job not to tell people what they need, but to figure out what they need and do whatever it is you can to deliver what they want, where they want it, how they want it, etc. And so a product manager would be someone more who would say, well, this is the kind of class or course or event or whatever it might be that people need because I know they need it, and then you build it and offer it, and maybe they come or maybe they don't come. But we do know that the closer you work with your customers, listening to your customers, the better chance of success you have. One of the things that we do in one of our trainings is train what we call the 10 steps to ensure that a new program is going to be successful. And those 10 steps include this concept of finding out what it is people really want. And the best example I can give you on this is that I was doing a training up in Ottawa probably about 10 years ago, and we were talking about the same concept. And one of the people in the room went around that night to all his classes, and he asked everyone, what time do you want what time do you want classes to start? 6 o'clock, 6:30, or 7 o'clock? All the classes started at 7 o'clock. 86% of the people said they wanted the classes to start at 6 o'clock. So that told him 2 things. One, it told him that the people who were coming really were committed because it was not being offered when they wanted. The second thing it told him was there were probably a lot of people who weren't coming because he wasn't offering it at the right time. I went back a year later to do another training there, and I saw him, and I said, so what did you do? He changed the time to 6 o'clock, and his registrations went up by 35%. This is at one level obvious, but a lot of us aren't doing this, and if you want to increase revenue, this is a great way of doing it. Second thing is grow your business on repeat customers. We know that in continuing education, just like grocery stores, you grow your business on the people who repeat, not on the people who are new. And in continuing education and community education, the goal is to have a repeat rate in the open enrollment side, that's people signing up for individual classes, of somewhere between 30 and 50%, and on the contract sales side to have a repeat rate of 50%. If your repeat rates are less than that, you're doing a lot of work generating new people and probably spending a lot of money trying to get these new people, and those dollars could be going into something else in order to help generate more revenue. And so we grow our business on getting people to repeat. We always, of course, want new people, new clients, new businesses, etc. But if we're not getting the repeat rate, which means if we're not listening to our customers, if we're not fixing the things that they don't like, if we're not doing all the things that make them want to repeat, then it's going to be hard to grow. And so I would really say, again, another obvious one is, but focus on your repeat customers. Promote to them more often. Survey the people who participate more than the people who don't participate. Do all the things to listen and to work with your repeat customers in order to get them to repeat. I mean, just think about a grocery store. When you go into a grocery store, you spend $100, but you're not really worth $100 to that grocery store. If you lived in this area for 10s and 20s of years, you're worth hundreds of thousands of dollars to them. And so everything they can do to get you to repeat is well worth it. So another formula that's always good to know in our business is what's called lifetime value. And lifetime value takes the repeat rate and takes the average that people are paying and tells you really on an average what is a customer's lifetime value with you. The third one is let your revenue generators generate revenue. Revenue generators are people who do course programming or people who go out and do sales. So course programming more for open enrollment, sales more for contract training. I would say that in general, when I visit programs and I talk to revenue generating staff, I find that they spend less than 15% of their time developing new programs, finding new instructors, doing the things to grow open enrollment, or actually outselling, and that would be your contract folks. And so we're not putting enough time into generating revenue. People are too engaged in the operations, the day-to-day type things, and that's why we would argue at LERN to centralize your operational efforts with a few people or a certain percentage of your staff, and then allow those revenue generators to get out of the day-to-day to do their business. Because when you look at a revenue generator, the expectation is that they should be generating somewhere between 6 and 20 times their salary, with the average at 12. And so if I have to spend 50% of my time on operations but not on revenue generation, then you're taking that 6 to 20 times half of my salary. So just freeing me up to do my job is going to be new revenue for you. Fourth one is price for profit, and there's lots of different formulas that I see people use when it comes to pricing, and I'm not as concerned really right now about the best way to price, but when it comes to increased revenue, you need to be thinking in terms of what are called price breaks. So for example, $100 is a price break. You don't want to price at 100. You want to either be below it or be above it. And normally if you're going to be below it, you're going to be at $95 or $99. If you're going to be above it, you're actually going to go all the way to $125. So this is a good example of additional revenue. If you're pricing classes at $105 or $109 or $112, you're leaving money on the table, because if you know it's worth more than $100, the next number you're concerned about is $126 when it's over that $125 break. I would say that when I visit programs and I review their catalogs or their websites, normally if they can think in terms of price breaks and then ending their prices with 5s and 9s, their revenue is going to go up by 10% just by doing that. And then the fifth one that's obvious, but not everyone does, is what I call the 30% rule. And what this means is that when you look at your mix of programming, you want to make sure that no one product area or no one market segment or no one delivery method is more than 30% of your business. Because you need to have a diverse portfolio. So just like your stock portfolio or investment portfolio, whatever, you want it to be diversified so you're not dependent on one stock. Well, the same thing's true here. You don't want to be dependent on one product area or one market segment or one delivery method. So just by forcing yourself to have more diversity in your product areas, having more diversity in the market segments you sell to, and having more diversity in your delivery methods forces you to do more things that are going to bring more people to the table, because they want a different product area than you're offering, or it's a different market segment and you can market to them differently, or it's a different delivery method, online versus face-to-face. So just having that diversity is going to give you more revenue. So you get more revenue by giving people what they want. That was the example of the person who changed the time from 7 to 6. By focusing on your repeat customers, you get more business. It's 6 times more expensive to get a new customer. That means you can put more energy on getting people to repeat, and if you're doing a good job, normally they are going to repeat. Your revenue generators can certainly generate more revenue. Think of that 12 times and take a look at how you're performing today, and then have a brainstorm with your staff. What is stopping you from generating more revenue? And those things then are the things that should be centralized in operations. Take a look at your website, take a look at your catalog, and take a look at price breaks in 5s and 9s, and we have lots of information on this at LERN that you can contact us on. And then think of the 30% rule. And even if nothing else I talk about today you consider, but you at least consider these 5 things, and if you're doing them, you consider doing them better, I can guarantee you your revenue is going to go up and you're going to generate more business. So one of the things also just to keep in mind before we go in and take a look at the 8 new ways is that there is a process we teach at LERN called the 8-step needs assessment model. And this is a model that you can use for just general new programming, or you can use for new revenue streams. So when we talk about today, you know, the different ways to make more money, well, you need to decide what's appropriate for you. And there may be lots of other ways that you've come up with. And so this process is sort of used to help you determine what is the best new direction. And what I'd like to do is just take you through the model and just explain it very briefly, but then more important, explain to you what the guidelines are that support the model. So you're looking at a chart here, and it's got 4 different quadrants. And think of those quadrants as years. So let's assume we are in the year 2014. So in the year 2014, you are brainstorming and researching new revenue streams for 2016. But also in the year 2014, you are selecting and modeling the new initiative or the new revenue stream for 2015. Also in 2014, you are rolling out the new initiative or new revenue stream for 2014. And also in 2014, you're evaluating the one from 2013, trying to add some structure to how you actually determine what your new revenue streams are. Now, let's think about this with regards to guidelines, and these are, to me, the key guidelines. If you were to walk into my office with a new revenue stream, a new initiative, a new way of making money, these are the questions I would ask you. The first question is, if we're going to put time and energy into this, will it last for 3 years? And you'll probably convince me it'll last for 3 years. The second thing I'll ask you is, by year 3, not over the 3 years, but by year 3, will this new revenue stream be generating $100,000 or 5 to 10% of your total revenue? Meaning, is the juice worth the squeeze? Are we going to be getting revenue out of this that justifies the work we're going to do? You'll convince me of that. The third question I'm going to ask you is, will you have an operating margin of 40% by year 3? Basically meaning if you generate $100,000, will you have, after your direct costs, at least $40,000 left over? Meaning if we're not going to generate the appropriate operating margin on this new revenue area, is it really worth doing? And you'll convince me of that. But the fourth one is the hardest one. This is when I'm going to say, well, show me the names. Show me the 1,000 to 10,000 people you're going to promote this to, or the 25 plus companies you're going to sell this to. And again, I understand some of you may be in more rural environments or your smaller programs, et cetera, and these numbers may be different. It may not be 1,000 to 10,000. It may be 500 to 1,000. But the point is, are there enough people to market this to, and have you identified who they are? Why would you build a new revenue stream if you don't know who you're selling it to? And one of the questions I get sometimes is, well, how many new initiatives should we be doing? And I would argue that for every $1 million to $1.5 million you generate, you should be doing a new initiative. So if you're a program of $1 million, you should do 1 new initiative a year. If you're a program of $10 million, well, you might be doing more like 6 to 10 new initiatives a year, because you probably have different business units within your organization that should be generating their own new initiatives. So it's a guideline to take a look at. So we talked about the obvious things, and now what I've shown you is a model that I recommend you think about. And LERN has a publication that I wrote called Creating Winning Initiatives. And that talks specifically about this process and these guidelines, et cetera, so that if you're really serious about looking at, new revenue streams, there's work you need to do, because there may be a revenue stream that I suggest that it's not appropriate to you. And as you take it through this process, you may decide it's not something you can do. So one, obvious things. Two, there's got to be some sort of model or process you follow when you're determining what new revenue streams you're going to do. So let's take a look at the 8 that I'm recommending. Again, remembering it's not just product areas we're talking about. We're talking about different ways to generate revenue, to bring money in the door. So the first one is certificate programs, and it is clear that the fastest growing area in continuing education is certificate programs. And a certificate may be a grouping of courses that once someone completes, they get a certificate, or it may be actually taking a look at a cohort group that stays together and then completes that certificate. Normally in continuing education, certificate programs are as short a period of time as possible because people want the information as quickly. So a lot of times you see certificates that can be complete within 3 to 6 months, but there are certificate programs that are certainly longer than that. The reason why certificate programs is critical to your program is that Generation Y, people born between 1980 and 2000, is the future of continuing education. By the year 2020, these folks are going to be between the ages of 20 and 40, and this is going to be where your continuing education revenue is coming from. And so if we're not supporting Generation Y by that time, and certificate programs is the best way to support them, you're not going to be positioned to be successful. The reason why certificate programs are critical to Generation Y is that Generation Y is clearly a group that's going to be moving into different jobs. And it is pretty clear that in order to be successful in these days and age, you need a degree. So the assumption is someone's got a degree. But the certificate actually speaks to their skill set. And so an example of that is my daughter-in-law had over a 10-year period of time 4 different jobs. And this wasn't because she got fired. It's because she was trying to improve her skill set. And so when she went for a new job, she earned the certificate first that would demonstrate she had the skill set. So now she had the expertise of whatever work she had done, and she had the certificate for this new area she was being hired in. And what this brings up is a really important point when it comes to certificate programs. So in the 1970s, when I was looking for a job, there were hundreds of jobs for millions of people. I could be an accountant, I could be a banker, I could be a garbage man, but jobs weren't as specified as they are today. And today, there are millions of jobs for tens of thousands of people, basically meaning that it's sort of flipped. And now there's lots of different jobs out there, and they're not as big a group to sell them to. But what you want to be is you want to be able to identify those jobs that don't have certificate programs so you can build them and you can become the expert in that area. And then you can promote it not just locally, but you can promote it globally. And that's why when we talk about certificate programs as the future, it's the future as online certificate programs, because there's no way you're going to have enough people in your local area to support a certificate program for an extended period of time. Here's the example on this one. I was working with a program in Minnesota, and that program was, we were having this discussion, and someone in the room sort of scratched their head and said, "You're right. We're working with a group of ditch digger viewers, and we've realized that there is not a certificate for this group, and there are only 10% of the ditches in Minnesota are actually viewed. And so there's clearly jobs here, and there needs to be a way that we can demonstrate that people have expertise in this area." So one of the things that your course programming staff should be doing is looking at, in the industries you support or industries you could support, what are jobs that don't have certificates so you can actually build the certificate and be the leader in the area. So the first new revenue area is certificate programs. Lots of people are doing this already, but really the transition now is thinking in terms of how do I look at jobs that don't have certificate programs, and how do I become the expert in that area, and how do I build it so that it can be taught face-to-face but also can be taught online. And so with regards to Lumens, Lumens has complete capability of supporting certificate programs, and so that you can build all types of certificate programs and most important, and I'm going to bring the example up again later, but most important is that you have the ability to track students. One of the ways that you're going to grow revenue with certificate programs, if it's not a cohort group, is by making sure you're tracking people and following up with them and getting them to complete the certificate program. This goes back to repeat rate. Why would you put all your energy in trying to find new people if you're not getting the existing people to finish the certificate? And so you want to put that energy in. Lumens has the capability to be able to provide that tracking so that you can focus on getting people to complete their certificates. The second new revenue area is what's called inbound marketing. So we know that we need to have a diversified promotion mix. We need to promote what we're doing in lots of different ways. So we print things, we e-market, we do advertising, we've got word of mouth, we've got our website, etc. And one of the things we do know that is direct mail is reducing. 10 years ago, direct mail was about 90% of how we spend our marketing budgets. In this day and age, we're at 75%, and that percentage is dropping. It's dropping faster for some programs than it is for others, depending on how good email mailing lists you have. But basically, we know we still need to print and we still need to mail to people, but we also need to diversify our promotion mix. And certainly, one of the things we do is what's called e-marketing, which would be more pushing, where basically you're sending emails to people, e-blasts, to try to get them to participate. So much like an e-blast was sent for this webinar, we're trying to get you to participate by pushing out to you. But what inbound marketing is being able to drive people to your website because they've searched for something and you come up. And when you come up with something that they actually need to fill out in order to get. So one of the things that's really important is making sure that your website has the best search engine optimization possible. You know, putting time in, making sure that the words that are on your website are the words that are going to attract people when they're searching. There are people out there who are experts at doing this. One company that LERN works with is Modern Earth, and they will look at your website. They will evaluate your website when it comes to search engine optimization and make recommendations of things that you can do. But when we talk about inbound marketing, then it's having a good website that it's attracting people, but then it's also promoting things that get people to come to your website in order to get a white paper, in order to watch a video and whatever. And when you're doing that, you're actually collecting information about them so that now you can market to them. And that's what's called drip campaigns. When you actually have people who have shown interest, for example, in your summer camps. And so they haven't actually registered, but you can set up a campaign that every month, for example, they get a reminder email. They get something which may be, something from one of your camp counselors, or it may be a video of a great camp that took place the year before, but things that constantly remind them that they ought to make this decision. And these reminders can be set up automatically, so it saves staff a tremendous amount of time. One of the other things that I want to say here, and it fits in here, but it also fits in other places, is that I think one of the big trends that's occurring, particularly for those of you who are doing professional education, is to ensure that you are providing not just classes, but you're providing technical assistance so that someone can contact you and you can give them more than the ability to sign up for a class. You can give them the support, you can give them help. One of the ways of doing this is with inbound marketing, in that they get a list of, the 10 tips to do something or whatever, but that's that's technical assistance beyond a class. And so you're demonstrating you are the expert in this area. And so that becomes more and more in the forefront of people's minds when they think about whatever that product area might be. LERN does a lot of work with George Washington University, and we run their event management certificate program for them. And one of the things we put a tremendous amount of energy in is providing that technical assistance to the students so that they're seeing that this is not just a place to take classes, but it's also a place where they can get answers to questions they have. So when it comes to inbound marketing, you want to think about your ability to have a website that people will come up when people are doing search engine optimization. And I'll go back to George Washington again and say, we spent 6 months on search engine optimization, but we went from the 10th page to the first page. And that in itself is worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so just that energy makes a big difference. But think about technical assistance, and also think about this concept of drip campaigns. And as part of Lumens, there's something called Lumens Connect. And Lumens Connect is an inbound, outbound marketing tool. And it may also be called a CRM, customer relationship management tool, but basically it allows you to do the types of things I was just talking about. So in this example here, we're giving out a free white paper that people are being driven to the website to be able to download, but we're tracking that and we're seeing what conversions are taking place because of this. And so the concept of thinking this way and being proactive in your marketing this way is clearly going to allow you to be generating more revenue going forward. The next new revenue area is merchandise, and merchandise may not be the best word to be using here, but basically selling other things besides just your classes and your contracts. Selling products, selling services. So, you know, you're selling add-ons, for example, where you do a class and you sell a book that's part of it. Or you might sell a contract and you provide consulting that's part of it. But you're trying to think in terms of, besides just the class or just the contract, what else can I be selling them? So merchandise is obvious. Say if you're doing a community ed program and you're selling T-shirts or you're selling, you know, equipment or whatever it might be that you're selling to go along with. But think about your other programming, you know, and maybe in the professional end, where you're selling X amount of consulting with an expert that might be part of what's going on, or you're selling additional books that are going to be engaged with that. And one of the things that's important here is that, you know, in the past we would sit around the table and we would be talking about how many registrations we generated. Well, now we sit around the table and we talk about how much revenue we generate. So we're talking and looking at different ways to generate revenue on top of an additional class. And again, you're demonstrating expertise and diversity here, so that, yeah, maybe I can't take the class, but I can buy the book, or maybe I can take the webinar, or I can do something else that feeds into the class or contract that was being sold. And so again, with Lumens, Lumens has the capability that's being added this fall to be able to sell merchandise. And so merchandise may be a parking permit, or it may be clothes, but it also may be some additional service or a book or something else that you want to be able to add in with what you're selling. And so I think the concept here is that when someone is building a new course, or even when they're selling a contract, is trying to think of what other things can I add to that. I was working with a community college that was doing a lot of medical programming, medical classes, etc. And they were actually selling, as part of their classes, the ability for the student to be able to consult with someone on how to get a job in this field. So it's thinking about what are all the other things that I can do as part of this class that I could generate additional dollars at. So the class itself might be averaging $150, but when I have these other options, maybe the class now is increased in value to $175. Well, that's a lot more revenue that you're taking in than you were taking in before. The next one is solution selling, you know, and this is pretty clear in the contract sales end, but it is also happening in the open enrollment end. Solution selling means that we're not just about providing information, which is a little bit about what I was just saying a moment ago. but we're actually about selling solutions. So on an individual student end, what we're seeing is more and more programs doing advising. And so what I mean by advising is you have someone on your team that when someone calls up, they can talk or walks in or emails in or whatever it might be, they can communicate with that person, and that advisor can provide them tips on what exactly it is they need to be doing and actually guide them with regards to signing up. And a lot of times the types of programs we're talking about here are pretty expensive programs. Another good thought on this is that one of the trends we're seeing in certificates is the ability to build your own certificate. So I come in and I want to have expertise in a certain area, and you help me actually build that certificate by selecting the appropriate courses. This advising is what's getting people to get connected and actually register and participate in your programming. Another thing for students is job placement and the ability to find a job. I mean, one of the things I hammer home over and over as I visit programs, particularly community colleges, is that our responsibility is jobs, and how do we ensure that people are getting jobs, improving in their jobs, et cetera. Well, one of the services that you're starting to see programs do is provide job placement, and they may charge for this, so that it's not just a way of getting someone in the door, but it's also a way of generating additional revenue. When it comes to the contract training side, or contract sales side, this is clearly where we've seen a lot more of this. But this is, I don't just sell training, but I sell consulting. Or I come in and help you build a software system. Or we provide mentoring for your staff. Or we do research for you. I mean, basically, you're going in and helping them improve their business. And the terms to use for both of these is like, we're here to provide efficiency. We're here to provide productivity. And here are all the different ways we can do it. And so solution selling both with students and clients really important. And one of the key things about it is, and this is really supporting of repeat rate, is it embeds them with you. Once you start to provide services like this, you definitely are the resource for them, even if you're guiding them to go somewhere else for what it is they need. They're seeing you as sort of the organization that's helping them make a decision, thus you're really a resource for them. And one of the things that Lumens provides is the ability to build all types of contracts into Lumens. So it's called B2B, and these contracts may be your normal training contracts, but they may be contracts that are consulting contracts or any other service type contract that's provided, and you're able to monitor and manage those contracts from the point of view of your initial contact all the way to final invoicing, et cetera. And so having that capability certainly supports this type of thinking. The fifth revenue area is what I call retention and customer service. We're seeing a lot more time and training and energy being put into the customer service side of continuing and community education. And the term people are using is retention. It's all about getting people to repeat, as we said earlier. And so we want them to come back. We want our staff to do things that get people to come back. And certainly providing great customer service is part of it. So lots of programs, as LERN advises, have what are called information specialists. So when people call in, they can talk to someone who actually can answer questions for them versus just having their call passed on to someone who may not get back to them for a couple of days. But they're basically responding immediately. And I think this is important to know, is that when I visit programs, and I ask frontline staff what percentage of questions can't they answer. They say 10% or less. So it means that most frontline staff can answer most questions that students are asking. And so we want to encourage them to do that. And the information specialist position is that concept of a person or people who really know the answer to most questions. And some programs actually take longtime staff and put them into these slots because whatever is going to be done with that customer up front is going to keep them engaged, but also it's going to save a lot of other people time having to get involved and answer questions. And so it really is a way of handling things up front. And think about when you call the electric company when you're having a problem. all you want is an answer. You don't want to get past the 3 people. You want the first person to answer your question. Another piece of retention is what we call it Learn Next Course, and I'll show you in a second Lumens' capability to support this, but basically you should have the ability to take a look at what people have registered for and know what they'll register for next. So when you send LERN your registration data, or if you're a Lumens user and you load your data into the market segment tool in Lumens, you're able to determine what the next course is someone's going to register for. So let's just say, for example, all of us on this webinar took ballroom dancing. The next course tool takes a look at what is it that everybody else registered for that I didn't register for. So if 95% of you also registered for singing in the shower, well, that then assumes that you should be contacting me and telling me when the next singing in the shower course is and getting me to register for it. And this may not be as critical with $19 classes, but when you start to take a look at classes that are $100, $200, $1,000, etc., it is well worth being proactive and chasing after people. And the best example I can tell you goes back to George Washington. When we took over George Washington Event Management Certificate Program, basically they outsourced that to LERN, so LERN actually runs and manages this for George Washington. For the first 3 years, the only things we did was improve the SEO, improve the customer service, and make sure that we stayed consistently in contact with people who went to information sessions and people who had signed up for the first certificate class. And we focused on getting them to continue to move through that certificate program. And in 3 years period of time, the revenue increased from $200,000 to $800,000. That is what I call new revenue, because if we hadn't taken those actions and done those things, we would have not increased the revenue. And so this is an example of what's called the Next Course Report, and this is a report that LERN can run for anyone if you provide us your registration data, but those people who are Lumens users have the ability to extract the data into the Next Course report, into the Market Segment Tool report, and actually run this report themselves and determine who they should be contacting about what new courses. The 6 new revenues expand your teaching pool. If you want to have new content, if you want to have new ways of offering things, if you want to have new information, I would argue go out and find new teachers. This is the grunt work of being a course programmer. And if you're spending your time doing logistics, that means you're not finding new instructors. And you need to be out there doing that. One of the things that I'm arguing to programs these days who are adding staff to be course programmers is that you might as well be looking at hiring Generation Y staff, because Generation Y staff understand better than anybody else what kind of classes Generation Y wants and has connection with potential Generation Y teachers, etc. And so time put into this ensures that you're improving. And one of the techniques that, or one of the concepts around this is that, you know, your job is to be in touch with your customers. So your job is to go where they go. So for example, when I'm working in the medical area and I'm working with nurses, then I should be attending the conferences nurses go to, because those conferences are telling me what it is they're being told that they need to learn or need to know. And your job in course programming is to be 3 to 5 years ahead of your customers. And the only way to be there is by doing the research that supports that. And the only way to be able to do that research is to get out of the day-to-day logistics. And so one piece of this is expanding your teaching pool. The more new teachers you find, the more new products you're going to have to sell. The 7th one is to provide more services. We've talked a little bit about this when we talked about merchandising, but what other things will people pay for? They'll pay for coaching and mentoring. They'll pay for one-on-one training. They'll pay for the example I gave earlier of a personalized certificate program. They'll pay to be part of an exchange. Let's just think of a language group where they'll pay X amount of dollars a year to be part of a group of people who are learning languages where they can connect with instructors one-on-one, for example, or to set up small groups, but basically be proactive in their own education. They'll pay for tutoring. And again, I'm not just talking about tutoring of 3-year-olds or 10-year-olds or whatever. Think about tutoring of adults. I, as an adult, need to build my skill area in a certain area. And actually, a very interesting example I just heard from a program yesterday was that there's someone who wanted to learn about aviation, and they wanted to do it one-on-one. And so they built a program just for them one-on-one. And I would argue that's one-on-one training, that's tutoring, that's that concept that people will pay for the things they need. They won't pay for the things they don't need, but that's what you learn by listening to them. So there's lots of new services that we're seeing. And then the last one is just, here are some other ideas that I hear. If you don't have a contract training department, you should. Contract training, certificate programs is the fastest growing area. The second fastest growing area is contract training, and the third fastest growing area is summer camps. And those are the areas that we need to make sure we're doing work in, because if we're not, then we're clearly missing potential revenue streams. Doing maybe a big event each year, not doing 20 small events, because you don't make any money on that. But if you're the expert or your institution is the expert in a certain area, well, then you running on a yearly basis an event that supports that concept. Just it's a yearly conference about X. And again, I see people do conferences like for admin professionals or conferences for women in business. Think in terms of very specific topics. What is it that people really need to learn about in order to be successful? And think about events there. People are offering webinars, and it's very interesting is that it's really important to offer free webinars, because free webinars open the door to get people engaged in some of your existing programming. But if you're doing some webinars on topics that are pretty high level, or they're utilizing experts in the field that they're not going to get anywhere else, you can charge for those things. And remember, you can have hundreds and hundreds of people on a webinar. So, you could do a webinar for $95 and make $10,000, $20,000 if it's something that people need. Summer camps, again, this is more the academic type summer camp. That's where the growth is, and it's really geared more towards middle school kids. Thinking in terms of generations, of course, really important because each generation has a different need. And so we've talked a little bit about Generation Y, but Generation X, baby boomers, et cetera. So think in terms of your market from a generation point of view. And then just what are the trends going on in your community, or what are the trends going on in business? What is it that people need to learn? And again, as a course programmer, staying on top of those trends then begins to show us the types of classes we could be offering that we're not offering right now. So those are all the things that I wanted to share. So again, we talked about some things that I thought were obvious. We talked about some things as a tool for you to be able to actually go in and determine what are good revenue streams. And then we went through a bunch of new things that people are doing. So I'm going to open this up now and just let Kayla see if we've gotten any questions, and I'll do my best to answer those questions for you. So go ahead, Kayla.
All right, it looks like the first question here is, why do you think it takes so much time for a new company to commit to contract training?
Well, that's a great question. So my statistics show that it takes between 6 and 12 months for a company to purchase from you the first time. Now, there'll be a company that will purchase in a week, and there'll be companies that you work with for years in order to get them to purchase. And a lot of that is driven on the dollar amount of the contracts that they're interested in purchasing for you. But I would argue it's all about relationship building. They want to feel comfortable with you that you can do what it is you say you can do. And they've never done it, and they haven't spent the money with you before. And so that's why the only way to do contract sales is with someone who is a salesperson. And I'm not talking about someone who's out selling widgets or cars or things like that, but I'm talking about someone who has the ability to go into a company and really determine what their pain is so they can figure out what that gain is. But also, and this is really important, when it comes to salespeople. You're never going to be able to have a salesperson who has subject matter expertise in everything. And that's why they're going to need to utilize either someone on the team who can provide that support or instructors, et cetera, to help them with that. Because once they've gotten you in the door, then, you know, closing that may take some time, but you also don't want them to get fully engaged in having to manage the whole contract. You want someone to be able to run with that. So main reason it takes so much time is it's relationship building, and someone needs to become comfortable with you. And if you don't have a person who is the one who's working with them directly, it's going to even be harder to close that initial sale.
All right. Looks like the next question here is, where can you go to find or stay on top of trends?
Well, this is one of the things LERN does. LERN tracks trends from what's happening in programming, marketing, sales, operations. So that's, you know, that's certainly one of the places that I would go. And if you haven't utilized LERN resources before, just go to info@learn.org and just ask, how can you help us with trends? I think another way people talk to me about looking at trends is looking at other programs. What are other programs doing? What are they offering? Third thing is the example I gave you about going to the nurses conference. You're going to where your customers go. I call it hanging out with your customers and going to wherever they go to hear what it is that they're hearing that they need to do. So those would be three things that I would suggest.
All right. The next one here, is there ever a good time to solicit new clients?
I would say we're always soliciting new clients. I don't think there's any time during the year. Again, I think most of us may say that summer's a slower time, but I don't really know if that's going to impact when. I think you're always trying to solicit. And, you know, you're trying to solicit by, you know, calling you're doing, but you're also trying to solicit by doing webinars, by being at events where you're going to connect with people, by using, you know, your board, your president, others in your organization to open doors. You know, there's lots of different ways to solicit new clients, but I think you're always doing it.
Okay. What are the top 1 or 2 differentiators between the biggest revenue-generating programs and less successful programs?
Yeah, that's a great question. And one of the things I teach on is something called Why Winners Win, which talks about the 7 reasons why successful programs are successful. But I would tell you that I think the 3 key reasons that really differentiate them is, 1, they have an operating structure that allows revenue generators to generate revenue. I think the second thing is they have a software system that supports their business they're in and allows them to be able to operate more efficiently and more productively. And, you know, I mean, I'm pretty clear that no software system makes everyone 100% happy. But if it can make you 80% happy, it's doing its job and it's ensuring that it's supporting your business. And I think the third piece is that programs that run their businesses like a business. And so, for example, they're really clear on accountability. They're really clear on what people need to be doing as part of their job. And they run with the concept of, we need to ensure that we're generating the revenue we need to generate. That means they're going to look at benchmarks more. That means they're going to be more conscious about some of the things I talked about already. But I would say I always say structure, software, and sort of what I call your operating system, which isn't a software system, but it's how you operate as a business.
All right, sounds good. Well, it looks like that's all we have for questions today.
So feel free going forward to contact me if you do have additional questions. I mean, if you need more information from LERN, there's the website, and info@learn.org will get you whatever you might be looking for. Feel free to contact me directly at my address, and I'm happy to answer any additional questions that came out of today. If you're interested in taking a look at Lumens, you saw a few things today that Lumens does, and want to get a sense for how Lumens might be able to help your program, Kayla can certainly help you with that. And there's an email address as well as a telephone number to call. So from my perspective, thanks a lot for attending. Appreciate you being here. As Kayla said, you're going to be able to get You will in 24 hours be able to get this presentation with the slides and my and what I've said along the way with it. So Kayla, thank you very much for organizing this.
Thank you again, Greg, for presenting, and thank you, everybody, for joining us. Please feel free to contact Greg directly with any further questions that you may have, or me if you have any questions for Augusoft. With that, I think we're ready to end today's webcast. Everybody have a great day.